Hello, I am Iro Gangansria, and this is pretty much the same presentation that I gave at the Polar Bear pitching in Oulu. Thanks again for having me. It was an honor, and I certainly, genuinely hope that you will enjoy what you're about to hear and you take it seriously. Please look into it yourself as well and talk to your colleagues, your friends, your spouse, your family, and let's act together because we have a chance of a lifetime here. Hope you enjoy. Many of us Finns long for Karelia, or Karjala as we say it, and Petsamo, which were lost to Soviet Union during the wars. I, for one, miss them for two reasons in particular. The absolute industrial mightiness of Enzo and the other industrial towns in Karelia, and the vast reserves of raw materials, minerals, and metals in Petsamo. What if I told you getting all that back is possible, and the only thing we must do is to decide and act according to the decision? Now, I'm not talking about invading those parts back. Don't get me wrong here. No, 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 no. But we have something here within our own borders which is just sitting on its butt and waiting to be utilized. This is one of the three major points you'll learn from what I'm about to tell you. First point is, who am I and what is it that I am doing? Second, how Finland could get back both the Karelian industrial might and the raw materials of Petsamo. In other words, why circular economy is a strategic weapon and how do we build one? And third, how to prepare your business to utilize this tsunami that is coming at us. All right, about me. I am 29 years old. This summer, I've been an entrepreneur half of my life, and I have some gray hair already. I started selling detergents used to wash laundry, dishes, ovens, and windows from door to door. I did that for 4 years on the side of school, and door to door sales for me was a way to really connect with over 1,000 people at their front door here in Finland. And it really taught me a lot about life, and it taught a lot about being an entrepreneur. Currently, I'm a second generation entrepreneur at a company called Capacity, it's said right here, where we build systematic chains to turn the waste management industry completely circular. Now, we all know going circular is the way to go down the road. We all know that we've gone over many of the critical thresholds of our planet, and we still keep going further. We all know what our linear way of life is causing to our dear planet, and we are only beginning to learn the magnitude of the harm we're causing. But what if there is an even more urgent reason to go circular than the environment? What if I told you that especially here, both in Finland, in the Nordics, and in Europe, there are several reasons why we should recalibrate our perspective towards what it would mean for us as a society to live in a circular economy. I think you've probably rarely, if ever, thought about sustainability from a non-environmental perspective. So, tuck in, because you're in for a ride. Let's begin with by defining what I actually mean by saying circular economy. To me, it means we're either upcycling our products or recirculating the materials already extracted from the earth back into our economy instead of using them as energy by incinerating it, or in the worst case scenario, landfilling the materials mixed together with organic waste. Okay. If we look at European circular material use rate for the latest year we have statistics for 2023, that is, we see that it is 11.8%, which is just outright unacceptable. This means that out of all products and goods produced in the EU, only 11.8% of the materials used were coming from circular sources. In fact, over 60% of all materials needed to run the European 17 trillion euro economy are imported. This means that the European economy, not only Finland's economy, is built on having nice, good behaving neighbors who are trying hard to be model citizens, much like us Europeans. Well, guess what? It turns out that the neighbors might not be such model neighbors after all. Okay, back to materials. What are these materials? Where do we buy them from? Are they our friends? And for how long are they our friends? So for example, metals, minerals, and rubber constitute roughly 2/2 of the total material imports of the EU. The biggest trading partners are China, the US, some South American countries, and a number of African countries. Now, if we briefly look at China, a trading partner without which the EU would absolutely crumble, we see that in China there is about 15 workers towards every person who's enjoying a pension right now, this is super solid. Everything's great. But within 9 years, there will only be 2 workers towards 1 pensioner. And in addition to the record high level amount of pensioners and record low level of workers, there is the fact that the money with which these pensions were meant to be paid with are sitting in harbors, railways, and other infrastructure projects all across the emerging markets, especially in Africa. Now, okay, it would be easy for China just to collect these loans, but you see, here's the trick. The challenge is that most of the debtors are actually unable to pay their credit back to China. All in all, China holds significant leverage over EU's influx of raw materials, not only directly, but also indirectly through its One Belt, One Road loans. Now, of course, I'm not taking a stand on what will China do. I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not taking a stand on what will China do in order to cope with these issues. But the conclusion that I draw, that for the EU, the Nordics, and for Finland, it would be extremely beneficial to drive up our self-sufficiency up, and to do that right now, because it would be so much nicer to watch these issues unfold without having so much at stake. I mean, we're having over 60%. And when it comes to Russia or the US as trading partners, I don't think I even have to get started. Everyone knows exactly what I mean. Just look at the U-turn in the foreign policy of the US. And Russia as a trading partner? Just give me a break, come on. Now, okay, you might be thinking, where's the proof? How do you know all this? Well, it's out there. How come nobody's talking about this? Well, just look at Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway, who has been the biggest shareholder of Apple for over 20 years. All of a sudden decided to sell 70% of his Apple stocks. The reason? Apple produces all of its products in China, gets all of their semiconductors from Taiwan, and has a linear business model. Not much to invest in right now. Then you might say, okay, all this is 9 years from now. Isn't the loss of biodiversity and climate change going to catch up within the same time frame? Yes, absolutely, but there is more. So, say we reach peace in the Ukraine this year, and the rebuilding of Ukraine starts. This means that we're starting effectively a project the size of rebuilding Western Germany after the Second World War. And that means that the price of raw materials, steel, brick, concrete, wood, plastics, you name it, will increase so much that the other industries will suffer and crumble. That is, without circular economy. Then there's the carbon credit trading, which accelerates costs even further. In 2028, all incineration of waste is subject to purchasing carbon credits. This will increase the cost of mixed waste fractions remarkably. Now, all this leaves us with two questions. Question number one, are you ready for all this? And number two, which of the materials EU is importing now we could not find in our own waste streams? The answer to the first question, I'm happy to discuss with you. Book a meeting, call, message, whatever. And the answer to the second question is nothing. Everything can be found in our own waste streams. Now, usually when I'm discussing waste and its role, and its true role in our society, I like to go back 170 years in time to find the perfect example from our history. Not Finland's history, but history of humankind. If we go back to the 1850s and into the US, okay? Bear with me. Let's imagine that all of you had a farm in the Midwest where you had slashed and burned, in other words, leveled the area to have fields for your crops to grow, right? One morning, you go to the well to get water for the family, and you find oil in the well. All of a sudden, your life's work was in ruins. Oil was considered waste because we didn't know how to utilize oil, and the annual oil consumption in the US was less than 2,000 barrels in the 1850s. But if we go forward 70 years into 1920s, when the annual oil consumption was already over 135 million barrels, and we repeat the same story, you would know you were rich staring at the oil in your well. Well, what's the point, you ask? Think about that attitude change. In 70 years, from waste to the raw material of flipping everything. And the same thing works for the waste itself. We just haven't realized how to utilize it. Make no mistake, waste is nothing but materials which are mixed together in a nasty way. Some of the materials react or contaminate each other, some of them don't. We just need to collect these separately. Even in the case of the much discussed EVs or electric vehicles, with the current pace of things, which I emphasize is far from adequate, in 2030 in the EU, we in the EU would be able to produce 2.4 million EVs just by recycling the materials from the old batteries. And to give you a perspective of the numbers, last year there were over 1.4 million EVs sold in the EU. So, ladies and gentlemen, waste is the new oil. Waste will be the raw material of everything. Okay, so what do we need? We need a waste management industry. We need a waste management industry that transforms itself from managing waste into trading side streams to material processors, which then return the raw materials back into the economy. Now, we also need European businesses to transform their business models from linear ones to circular ones, because it is the business model that endures time. And I'll talk about this a little later. We need all this for the sake of Europe to stay as independent and sovereign continent. We also need a dynamic processing sector inside the waste management sector, which is able to make direct contracts with waste producers so that the processors can actually earn back the money they've invested and the risk they took in developing and deploying new technology. We also need to solve the challenge we have at locations where most of the waste is actually produced. Shared spaces, or as we like to call them, multi-user environments, such as office buildings, shopping malls, or just good old regular apartment buildings. In these spaces, we must not only track but also divide the costs based on how much each user or tenant has created waste, so that the people living in apartments or the tenants operating in shopping malls need to pay for every kilogram of waste they produce, just like they pay for every kilowatt hour of electricity or every liter of water that they use. Material consumption is no different. Now, to boil it down for you guys, we will get the raw materials we need from our waste streams. And in peaceful times, circular economy provides not only Finland, but the Nordics and Europe an edge with which we can be more successful in the global trade, and we cannot be threatened, blackmailed, or lured into arrangements or deals which are harmful for us in the long term. Okay? And in times of crisis, circular economy gives us one of the most powerful weapons there are: self-sufficiency, thus independency. Then there's the other side. How should businesses adapt to all this? How should they make their businesses sustainable? Well, let's begin by looking at how things were, what actually has changed, and what hasn't changed all that much, and probably won't. In the past 30 years, the race has been to as low as possible production costs, which meant that a lot of the manufacturing was moved around on Earth based on where labor was both accessible and really, really cheap. Raw materials used to be super easy to access. Cheap labor was easy to access because the transportation of the produced goods worldwide was easy. Okay? So now, today, and in the future, raw materials are not easy because of China. Cheap labor from Southeast Asia is not easy anymore because labor costs have risen so much. Transportation is not easy anymore because of the geopolitical jams and tariffs around the world. And add to that, if China decides to annex Taiwan, and you have a pretty good soup right there. And what already has changed, but is actually a good thing, is labor. The huge leaps taken in both AI and technology mean that the age of automatization has come. Businesses can nowadays actually start increasing the needed labor to manufacture goods because automatization is changing the game. This means that fixing, repairing, maintaining, and building of better quality goods is actually feasible, which hasn't been the case before. What hasn't changed are us, human beings. We still want everything easy, actually easier than ever before. Things need to be delivered where my journey began, on our doorstep. So, how should businesses react and adapt to these changes, including this one constant? Well, one term, two words: circular economy. So, if you're producing, or if your business is producing physical products, do not build your business so that you're incentivized to sell as many goods as possible, because that's just not going to fly anymore, because you need a lot of raw materials for that. And also, probably you need your products to move around the earth, which is going to be a lot harder in the future. Now, I understand this might sound scary, but bear with me. What the businesses should really focus on, instead of always selling new products, is selling the product as a platform to make money. But that is rarely feasible with one product or few products, unless the product is something that can be provided as a service through, for example, renting it. Now, if you don't have that, you'll most likely need to have an ecosystem. And for you to have an ecosystem, you really need to dig deeper into the market in which you sell products and look to other markets which are really close to yours. Or you could also look for markets that are far away from your market per se, but the things to actually look for are synergies if you were to have an ecosystem. So, for example, if you have a B2B business, the question is, what are the things that the same user is using and the same buyer is buying other than your products? Which of these services or products could be like bundled into an ecosystem that does three things? First, makes buying a whole lot easier. Second, it decreases either the amount of different products and services to buy or the amount of contract partners. And third, it decreases the frequency at which new things need to be bought. So when it comes to making a business more sustainable, includes the financial side as well, of course. And in my opinion, the best way to be and to stay financially sustainable is to making sure your business has none, or at worst very few incentives which are not aligned with the incentives of your customers. So let's take an example, a wild one. Say I had a robot vacuum cleaner factory. I would convert the business as following. First, you must ask, what is it that the customers are buying and why? Are they buying robot vacuum cleaners just because they are so flipping cute? No, absolutely not. They're buying them as a means to a goal, to have clean floors, right? Do the customers need to own the vacuum cleaners to achieve this goal? No, they don't. So, let's convert the business into a service which maps and analyzes the facilities that need to be cleaned. 2. Relocate the devices between customers according to the customer's needs and wants and as they change. And 3. Learn and develop a process how to efficiently overhaul the devices, the robot vacuum cleaners. So once again, what we're doing is we're making buying a whole lot easier by combining a lot of things. 2, we're decreasing either the amount of different products and services to buy or the amount of contract partners. And 3, we're decreasing the frequency at which new things need to be bought or tendered. Okay, and now, just to summarize the whole presentation to 5 points. Number 1, circular economy as Finland's strategic asset. So, instead of us longing for the lost industrial power of Karelia or the resource wealth of Petsamo, Finland can reclaim that same economic potential by fully embracing a circular economy. Everything that the EU imports in raw materials can be already found within our own waste streams, within our own borders. 2, Europe's economic vulnerability, which unfortunately is true. The EU imports over 60% of its raw materials, making it, us, economically extremely fragile and dependent on unstable trade partners like China, Russia, and the US. As global supply chains shift in the future, circularity is the key to self-sufficiency and therefore economic resilience. 3rd, waste is the new oil. Make no mistake, waste is not garbage, it's just mismanaged raw materials. Just like oil was once considered useless, waste can become the foundation for new industries. By separating, processing, and reintegrating materials, we turn waste into economic fuel. Number 4, business models must evolve from linear ones to circular ones. So companies should move away from selling as many products as possible and instead focus on products as a service models, ecosystems, and efficiency-driven solutions. This will increase customer alignment, financial sustainability, and overall long-term success. And number 5, circular economy is not just environmental. It is a geopolitical and financial move, and above all, weapon. So, with the rising material cost, geopolitical risks, and climate change, the circular economy is not just about sustainability. It is a defensive weapon for Finland, the Nordics, and Europe to maintain our independence, security, and long-term prosperity. So, I'd like to end with closing remarks, crystallizing what I've said. If in your business there are multiple incentives which are against to those of your customers or against the incentives of circular economy, you will find yourself in the wrong side of the history. Ladies and gentlemen, the time of circularity is here. Embrace yourselves. Thank you.